Hello, everyone. Is this working? Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is a talk I want to give about the art of Celeste, like a general hows and whys of what we did and why the game looks like this. I'll first introduce myself. My name is Pedro, but most people know me as Saint11 Twitter. I did a bunch of pixel art tutorials that people sometimes recognize, but I also do 2D art, and well, a bunch of stuff. How many of you know of Celeste or play Celeste? Just to me. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, if you don't, the game looks like this. It's a pixel art platformer, very low resolution. I'm going to break down the process into 3 steps. We have the Pico 8 version, which was a small prototype, a small version of the game that Matt and Noel made in 4 days around. And then there's the pre-production, which is like the whys of what we did. And there's also then there's the production itself, which is how we did like the things technically. The Pico 8 version, I wasn't directly involved to it, but we use it as a base for the whole game itself. It's a smaller version of the game made in 4 days, and I think I need to duplicate it because it's kind of hard to remember everything. Let me see. I got it. Did I broke it? No. Okay. So yeah, on this version, we nailed the basic elements of the game before everything. The game was going to be a platformer. There's a lot of jumping and dashing, and most of the game is going to have like environmental mechanics, no upgrades, nothing of sorts. And this also helped to define the basic art style of the game. Like Madeline, the player character, would have a hair that follows her. The game was kind of surreal. We had a lot of what I call video game logic to it. She jumps, then she dashes, and to recover the dash, she would get a balloon. So that makes no sense in the real world, but that's how the game logic would work. So these kind of things, they carry on. And the game was going to be very fast, too. After the Pico 8 version was settled in, we decided to make it like a big game, like a real thing. And for the pre-production, we went with a non-linear process, which is like we didn't have like a month or two to make a big pre-production and decide everything. We were going to make things on the fly. Every time we had a new idea, we would go back and review it and see what we wanted, if that fits and how that works. And working like this has a lot of advantages. I think it helps us to be more creative and to come up with new ideas, but also wastes a lot of assets. We throw away so many assets, but that's fine. It's part of the process. The first thing we did is try to define the style of the character. I think that was the central point right on the start. We knew a lot of things from the Pico 8 prototype, and I think listing those things and knowing what are your limitations helps a lot. We knew we wanted to keep the resolution low and around the same. We knew the hitbox was going to be small, around 6 by 10 pixels. There was going to be a story. The game was going to be fast, and we also wanted the game to be accessible in a sense that not only like I said, about accessibility, but also about not being a game not marketed, but our target audience was just like the regular gamer stereotype. It was supposed to be for everyone. And the game was going to be big. It was going to have a lot of rooms. I think we planned at first around 100 levels, but we ended up with more than 800 rooms, which is a lot. So yeah, we needed a style that could be made fast. I started with the player character, and as you can see, I'm not sure if you can see very well, but there's a line of a bunch of Madeleines. They all have a small difference from the previous one. That's how I usually make concept for pixel art. I do a rough design, and then I ask a question, like, maybe she can have ears, maybe she can have an eye, or maybe she can have a green hair. And every time I do a new version, I see if that new version improves or makes everything worse. Usually makes everything worse. Eventually, we ended up with that last version, the animated one. You can see that I'm not sure if you can see, but she has eyes in this version. We removed that after a while. I'll explain why too. After Madeline, we went to the other characters. The design process with the other characters is slightly different. And it's also, I think, different from most pixel art games that I've seen. We usually start with the pixel art, a rough version of the pixel art. And then Amora would make a concept art based on the pixel art, which is like a higher resolution of the characters to show the personality and everything. Oh yeah, sorry, the pixel art is also based on some brief, some story, or something that we wanted in the game. And then after the concept art, we would jump back to pixel art again and fix everything, change everything on the small sprite according to the concept. This is also has a lot of iteration, and we lose a lot of time doing this, but I think it's one of the best ways to do a pixel art game, because then you know your sprite will work on the small scale, which is honestly one of the most important aspects of the game. And we still have a character that has a lot of personality and everything. The animation, too, we had to make some decisions on how we were going to work with it. We wanted it to be very cute and bouncy and expressive. To do that, I tried to lower the color count as much as I can of the sprite, just so I could do more frames and do more of it, right? This way, so yeah, lowering the color count would, but not in a limiting way. It's more about animating the silhouette more than anything. We also used a lot of twins. I'm not sure if you can see here, but when Oshiro hits the roof, he squeezes a lot. When Madeline jumps, she also we compress her horizontally, stretch her vertically, and stuff like that. Eventually, in the development, we hit a big problem, which was we wanted portraits and text, but having a lot of portraits and text on a tiny resolution is hard. First, we lose a lot of definitions on the portrait. We used a similar approach on Towerfall, our previous game, and on Skytorn, which is a game where we were working before too. So, kind of looks good and authentic and very nostalgic, but if you redraw the whole portrait again in pixel art, you lose a lot of time. And if you just scale it, you lose a lot of resolution, it kind of looks weird. And localizing a pixel art font is very hard, especially if we're going into Chinese and Japanese, which has so many characters, symbols and stuff that it's hard. So our approach was to go all the other way. We were going to have a thing we were calling different worlds. We separated the game into the game world, which is basically a game camera. The game camera follows all the rules that the game does. So it's pixel art, it's very low resolution. Absolutely no pixel can be larger or smaller than the pixel itself. So we render it to a canvas and scale it. We have the UI world, which is high resolution 2D with the portraits and text, so we can have all the freedom we want to use any font we want. And we have the map world, which is where you select where you're going in the game, which is fully 3D, which is cool because you can look in all the sides and kind of explore it. And so we decided to go with the best thing we could for each location. And location in not physical location, but layers of game, which is really fun and good, but there's also a lot of problems with that. For example, this heart, a crystal heart you get in the game, As soon as you get it, it shows up in your UI. So you have to draw it again in high resolution and animate it again in high resolution. And then you look at the crystal heart in the map world, and you have to model it. So it's a lot of extra work, but I think it pays off. As long as one world doesn't leak to the other, it's fine. We can keep consistency. One of the characters, Badeline, it's our main antagonist, she bends those rules a little bit. She kind of goes out of the portrait and out of the UI, and that's why she's so scary, because she's bending the rules. She's like looking at the character from the UI to the game world, so that's kind of scary. So if you have these different worlds too, you can also do stuff like this. You can bend those rules to create interesting things. We were thinking of making her get completely out of the UI and into the game, but then I think that was too much, and then we just stopped there. And that's what we ended up with. We decided to go with no faces in the end, just because portraits are there for that reason, right? Portraits should do the expression and should do the characters themselves. Like the art style was kind of impressionist inspired, which means like we had a lot of big blocks of color, we have big pixels, and this way we could have the player themselves to imagine what they want when they look at the game. So when you see Madeline, when you're playing, the Madeline you're seeing, it's not the same Madeline another player is seeing. And that's kind of what we wanted there. We didn't went with old school limitations or anything to emulate or an old video game console or to get a nostalgia feeling. It has some, but it's not about that. The pixel art there is a medium for having an art that's a shared experience between us that we are making the art and the player. The player completes the thing, like the sprite on their hand. Now, about some technical aspects I'll explain some of the hows and how we solve some of the problems. It's a little boring, but most of the sprites were made in A-Sprite, which is amazing. If you're into pixel art, you probably want to use A-Sprite in general. And then we would export all those frames in an image sequence. We would have a sprites descriptor, which is an XML file where we would type all the animations and have properties like the delay, how many frames, and if that loops, that goes to another animation, stuff like that. And then that would have an ID, like fly feather. Then engine would call for that ID. That thing would look into the atlas, get all the frames, and then play on the screen with the proper animation name. It is a good process, gave us a lot of freedom without having to recompile the game all the time. But if we ever make like another 2D game, we probably want to go with and make something like a proper editor for animation, because this can get very tedious, especially with things with a lot of animations and a lot of frames, because you have to type them all. And well, yeah, it has some good times, some good sides and some bad sides, as most things here. The tile sets, they are brutally 8 by 8 pixels, so that's very, very small. And to tile them all, we had to make all possible variations on a tile set. And we didn't want to place them manually, which would probably look good, but also with 800 rooms, we don't want to do that, right? So each tile set had like all the possible combinations. Top row, bottom row, all junctions and everything. On the editor, they kind of look like this. I think this is an old version of the editor, but still, you just place the blocks, and then the auto tile will choose from the tile set. Then we have like a foreground and background tiles, and everything kind of fits into each other. But the problem with that is, even with all those variations, everything kind of looks very repetitive. So we added a thing we call decals. Decals are just big images that we just glue them into the level. We made so many decals for this game. And I think having those things that we can hand place them into the scene helps a lot on the variety and to make the levels feel alive and more unique. Another cool thing about the decals is, like, for example, I made this stalactite, and I wasn't the one actually placing them into the levels, and then I made it thinking about maybe we'll put in a cavern or in the ceiling or something, and then Noel made like this, which is, I'm not sure if you can see, but it's like a mountain of those, and it put a sheep in the middle. So it is good because that wasn't the way I intended that prop to be used, but that creates interesting situations where the designer can also create new things based on the pieces of art I gave. I remember, like, Matt a lot of columns. I would give Matt a bunch of column pieces, and they would just fill the whole thing with columns. So yeah, it's cool to have like to give the creativity of painting this level to everyone that's involved in the process. The background and foregrounds are also actually very simple. They are just like big images on the back, usually. And then we had, like, again, an XML descriptor. We loved XMLs in Celeste. And then we would have stuff like, put this image in the back. Now put this image with a scrolling factor. Now put this image that moves. So it's all lines of layer, kind of like you would do like in Photoshop, but then we would just write it down. And that allowed for a lot of creativity and a lot of experimentation too. We could try many backgrounds and many foregrounds without recompiling the game all the time. Another cool thing is the hair, the Madeleine's hair. You can see when she moves around, her hair like bounces a lot and moves in cool, interesting ways. In our previous game, Towerfall, we had some characters. Oh no, what did I do? Is it still? Oh no. Sorry. Where's my slide? Oh, it's on the other monitor. Okay, I can do it. Shit. Okay, I did it. Okay. I don't know how I solved it, but it's there. Okay, there's a little bar in the top now, but it's fine. Okay, so the hair in Towerfall, our previous game, most of the characters on the first version, they had a long hair. I had to draw the hair, like falling, jumping, running, everything. And then that was a lot of work, and honestly didn't look very good. Then we had the character which was the White Archer, and she had like this hair that would follow her, which is made in the same way we did in Celeste. Actually, Madeleine's hair, it's only this bright, basically. It's just a circle, white circle. The way we did it, we would have like the hair like glued on her head, like behind her. And then we would have several parts of like those circles following it. So every time she moves, we would have the previous circle follow the parent circle on an offset. And if she goes too far, it would snap it. And that's basically it. And then we would like have a tinting for changing the color, because the hair is actually white. And for wind and other stuff, you would just apply a wave function to the offset. So the offset would change. So the hair would try to get into a different position and then fall back and stuff like that. And that's kind of basically it. I think I rushed, right? Yeah.
Hello. Fantastic talk, first of all. So something I was wondering about is in Towerfall and Celeste, you work at very, very low resolutions. And when you're working in low resolutions, a huge problem a ton of people run into is readability. Being able to tell, like, what am I looking at? And part of it is like, when I'm looking at a character, being able to like see in my head, like, oh, what is this? That's a really interesting component. But I'm wondering, when you do your character first in sprite art and then do that drawing, have you already thought about what are the readable traits on this character? Like, what's important? Or what's that process kind of like?
That's a really cool question. When I'm doing very, very low resolution, I kind of like when things get ambiguous. Like, for example, Madeline, I'm not sure if I have a big sprite of her here. But yeah, you can see like she has a backpack and there's a thing on her back here, right? And canonically, it's a water bottle, but honestly, I always thought it was like a pen or whatever. 'Cause I don't know. But so it's open to interpretation. So when I'm doing like very, very low resolution pixel art, I do stuff on purpose that will look like a lot of things. And as long it's not like something that I don't want it to look, right? Like for example, the golden feather, which looked like a banana for so long. And people will say, like, why there's a floating banana in the level? And yeah, those things happen. But you have to pay attention to that. But honestly, most of the time, I kind of don't mind when things look more like a lot of things. It's an interesting thing to have.
Do you have so many eyeball enemies in Towerfall? Because eyeballs look good from a small resolution.
Yes. Eyeball looks really good in pixel art because it's a circle with another thing. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.